So today we're going to talk about being a real estate investor. There's so much information out there, understanding what you should be looking at and understanding long-term trends. When you see a graph, you really want to understand what that represents. I'm going to pull up one here that shows rent inflation, right? We've heard that a lot lately about inflation. Now they're saying it's about 2%. And what does that really mean, right? So the first chart, if you were to look at that's rent inflation historical in Canada over time. And if you went from, let's say, 1990, which was one of the smaller peaks, to 2000, that chart basically just goes down. It looks really negative. And on the right-hand side, you'll see what actual rents did over that period of time. So they went from about $500 to around $1,000 within that same amount of time. So if you were to look at that on a graph, it's going to go the exact opposite. It's going to just go historically up over time. So it's good to understand what the graphs are, right? Rent inflation is something you should watch for sure, because that's usually how much rents are going up. But it's very rare that they're coming down a lot, right? So even at 2%, that's 2% year over year. Rents didn't go from 8% to 2%. They didn't actually drop. They actually still went up. And maybe that's from a historical high. So it's good to understand as an investor what these charts mean. So one of the big benefits to investing in real estate is it's a hard asset. Generally, over enough period of time, it's going to outpace inflation. So there's things that you can watch, right? Like, how much money have we printed? How much money have we put into the system? How long does it take to come out of the system? So for me, it's hard to see governments coming in, making big cuts, slowing down money printing by a lot. I think it just kind of seems to be the way the world's going. They keep printing more money, taking more debt, and that does generally help hard assets. So I do think there's a good future there, but I wouldn't just look at this chart, right? Look at housing supply and how money affects that as well. How many homes are getting built? There's lots of different things to tie together. You just need to know how to look at all the charts in a bigger picture and understand what that means for rental and housing going forward. I'm bullish on it. I think we're undersupplied. I think there's still lots of inflation to go. They talk about 2% inflation, but nobody's feeling that yet, right? I don't think anybody feels this huge relief that we're only at 2% inflation. If you made 100,000 at a job, for the last 3 years, if your dollar's been devalued by 25%, you took a pretty big pay cut over the last couple of years, right? And wages generally never keep up with inflation. So there's lots of that has to get flushed out of the system yet. So with the inflation numbers that just came out, it looks like inflation is coming down. It'll be interesting to see what the Fed does with the interest rates. And I don't think, even if they move them by 50 basis points, that it has a huge impact on the market. I think a lot of the stuff's priced in well ahead of time. If they move it less, maybe that has some impact, but it's not like moving it that little bit is all of a sudden everybody's going to be able to afford to get a home.